Head 7. Concerning the charge of making canons, in which are expressed the qualifications of the members of general meetings and societies, and trying of scandalous persons. The societies being likewise misrepresented, in that they are said to make canons, expressing qualifications of the members of their meetings, particular and more general, and accordingly take to themselves the trial of scandalous persons. Therefore, to show the groundlessness of such an imputation, we shall speak a little both to the one and to the other. First, as to the alleged making of canons, the allegation is founded upon a question usually proponed to the members of our general meetings, which is this, quote, "Are you free of joining with the unfaithful, silent, and complying ministers of the time?" unquote, which, being so much displeasing to many, and much carped at, and also the occasion of the foresaid charge being taken from, we shall therefore propose some things concerning the charge in general, imputing to us the making of these so-called canons, and imposing such qualifications of the members of our meetings, and then touching the forementioned interrogation in particular. First, we think it an odious calumny, invidiously cast upon us by our traducers, that we have taken upon us to make canons. Neither do we understand what they mean by making canons, for, number one, if by canons be understood such constitutions or acts as flow from politic or ecclesiastic authority, that the societies did or do assume to themselves the making of such, we altogether deny. Number two, if they understand by them impositions or sinful restrictions, these also we deny and disown. Number three, if they understand them to be general and absolute rules laid down by us for all times and cases of the church, or for church fellowship and communion of saints in all its degrees, these also we deny to be among us. But if they mean some interrogations for discovering the persons we may concur with in our general meetings, these we own and acknowledge. But these are very impertinently called canons, neither did we ever call them by such a name, nor look upon them as such a thing. Secondly, whereas they say we make canons expressing qualifications of the members of our meetings, the truth is, we would have them so qualified as we may with comfort and confidence join with them in our selected fellowships, being of one accord, of one mind in the matter of our testimony. But hereby we make no rules, prescribing qualifications of church members and other kinds and degrees of church communion. And that this may be better understood, we shall here briefly and plainly express our minds. We deny not the communion of saints to and with others in many other degrees, whether they be natives or foreigners, under diverse considerations. For we distinguish betwixt a joining, which we may call Catholic or universal among Christians, considered as such, and an ecclesiastical joining among members of one particular organical church, considered as members of that church. As for the first, we subdivided it also into its degrees, for we may join with some Christians holding the same fundamentals. Ephesians 4, verses 3 and 6, and Acts 2, verses 5 and 9, comprehending all that are found in religion, excluding all heretics, we may join with others considered more strictly and upon stricter conditions, as Protestants, providing they hold nothing contrary to any of the Reformed Church's testimonies, but especially if they be faithful in their own particular testimony, though the word of theirs may not be the same with ours. We may join with others upon yet stricter condition, as our covenanted brethren, such as the members of the churches of England and Ireland, join together with us in the same league and covenant, providing they own it and prosecute the ends of it, and maintain the word of their testimony according to it, and their attained reformation. Albeit they have not the same word of testimony every way with us. As for the second, we own a communion upon stricter conditions and with stricter qualifications amongst the members of one church, and formed society, under subjection to the same Reformed doctrine, worship, and government. As for instance, this Covenanted Church of Scotland, which ecclesiastical communion, particularly in reference to our own church, is to be considered diverse ways, and accordingly is capable of diverse degrees. For either the church must be considered as constitute in good order, having judicatories for redressing abuses, in which case we think it were an usurpation, for private societies to assume the regulation either of joining or separating, without recourse to the judicatories, or it must be considered as ascending and growing up gradually unto reformation, in which case many things also may be borne with, especially by persons in a private capacity, and not made a matter of separation, because never reformed. Or lastly, which comes more home to our case, it may be considered as declining and falling back from some degrees of reformation attained unto, and as it is broken down by complete and habitual tyranny and epidemical apostasy, in which case our strictest degrees of communion, in selected fellowships at least, must be qualified with strictest conditions. Considering the present state of affairs in this broken state of the Church, for in these we must necessarily endeavor after sameness and agreement as to the word of our testimony among the constituent members of these societies, with whom we concur in a joint carrying on the public work. For we desire not to forget how the quarrel of our zealous and ancient Covenanters was stated, against papists, malignants, and sectaries, defection and schism, against sinful union as one extreme, and sinful separation as another. And all that join with us in our selected communion, we would have concerning the same quarrel. Thirdly, more particularly, as concerning the question called by them canon, which among others is proposed to the members of our general meetings, concerning their joining or not joining with the silent, unfaithful, and complying ministers of the time, we shall add these few things. Firstly, the occasion of the proponing this interrogation amongst us was, and is, because since our persecution began to increase, ministers generally had fallen into such sad and lamentable defections as is showed above. Therefore we would inform ourselves by that question to the members of our meetings, whether they had their countenance as formerly or not. However, secondly, by that question we understand no ministers, but these only to whom all, or at least some, of the foresaid adjective epithets are applicable. That is, either these who had complied with the enemy, or were become silent and lying by from the public work, or not discovering the palpable sins of the time, or were in such a measure unfaithful, as would be discerned censurable by our church constitutions. Secondly, as to the other thing objected against our societies, that is, the taking to ourselves the trial of scandalous persons, we profess and declare that all the trial of scandals or scandalous persons, which we judge lawful, expedient, and competent to private persons, notwithstanding of the greatest necessity, is merely popular and private. For information about the case or practice of the persons, in order to the regulating our consciences and our duty and carriage towards them, that so, according to the judgment of discretion, we may be fully persuaded in our minds as to what is right or wrong, false or true, and may not remain staggering or doubting in our duty and deportment towards them. Not judicial and authoritative, for we by no means judge it lawful to commit unto the people the power of discipline, no more than it is lawful for them to preach and administer the sacraments. Yea, so far are we from that sectarian principle that under no consideration whatsoever we judge it warrantable to assert that radically and originally the power of church government is seated in the people, and from them derived unto the pastors and elders, as it is in civil government, which cometh from God, the supreme Lord and King of all the world, and is radically seated in the people, and from them derived unto and conferred upon their magistrates and civil governors, whereas ecclesiastic government cometh from Christ the mediator and King of his own church, and by him is immediately conferred upon the rulers and officers of his house, with whom he hath promised his presence unto the end of the world. But to conclude, we desire a few things of our brethren unto whose hands this shall come. Number 1, that none may look upon us from what we have professed and declared in this our vindication, as having new sentiments about these heads. For we did never hold or maintain opinions as to these particulars contrary to what we have here expressed, so that this is not a change but an explication of our minds. And if any well-meaning person and zealously inclined amongst us hath through ignorance or mistake uttered themselves otherwise than we have here explicated, we are not to maintain the same. Number 2, we desire that no advantage may be taken against us from words or expressions in this paper through our weakness, but that the scope and design of the whole may be weighed and considered, and so that one part of it may not be divided from another, but that all the parts of it may be together considered and impartially pondered without affection or prejudice. Number 3, seeing the cause of God hath suffered great hurt by persons thereto much credulity, and believing ill and false reports, and spreading the same as real certainties, without ever trying or searching into the truth or falsehood thereof. And seeing that thereby our divisions and distractions have been greatly multiplied, therefore we desire, which we are also willing to grant unto others, that none hereafter may give ear and credit to bear reports of our accusers and traducers, without due trying and searching into the truth whereof, at least if not for our sakes, yet that they would forbear for the gospel's, seeing that from henceforth they may be convinced of our being so much wronged by such sad misrepresentations. Number 4. We desire that in time coming, any who shall hear or suppose such opinions or practices as are unsound and hurtful to be maintained and followed by us, may deal so friendly and Christianly with us as to admonish us thereof, in order to evince and convict us of the same, before they publicly vent such things or inform against us. Number 5. That nothing in this paper, which may seem more freely expressed, may be constructed as flowing from prejudice at any person or persons whatsoever, or from a glorying in our own mother's nakedness, which is also our own, or from an humour to debate. For we desire herein singly and simply to have a respect to the glory of God, the vindication of his truths, and, if the Lord will, the advantage both of the givers and receivers of misreports against us. In the meantime we commit the cause unto the Lord, and desire to wait until he shall arise and give testimony for his truths. For as we are firmly persuaded in our consciences before God that this is his cause, and the Covenanted Reformation which we are owning and suffering for, so we are hopeful that he shall, in his own appointed time, make himself known unto the world owning the same, how low soever it be now, and that as he hath been pleased even in these times of hot and heavy persecution of cruel and crafty enemies, and of sinful and shameful defection of the generality of ministers and professors, to raise up and signally to spirit not a few honored worthies, though mean, weak, and contemptible in the eyes of the world, valiantly to contend, faithfully to witness, and patiently to suffer for the same cause, even to resisting unto blood, in their steadfast adhering unto their sworn duties and principles, wrestling as men and Christians, as well for their natural and civil rights, as liberties against usurpation and tyranny, as for their covenanted religion against popery, prelacy, and sacrilegious supremacy, and also against the apostasy, compliance, and detestable neutrality of others. Which worthies, following the footsteps of the faithful cloud of witnesses that have gone before them, have portrayed a noble and renowned example of virtue, faithfulness, and courage to the present age, and have sealed and transmitted an honest and honorable testimony to posterity. So we hope the same testimony shall be continued to the Reformation among men of our principles and profession, at length until he shall make the blood which hath been shed, sealing the same, appear above ground to be the seed of the church, and cause his people to reap the fruit of this present fiery furnace, according to his word, promising that all things shall work together for the good to them that love him and wait for him.